Hey, what's up guys? Ethan Hamrick here with Wish Upon a Fish, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about a few tips to keep in mind when you're bass fishing in stained or muddy water. Stay tuned. Alright guys, so when you're on a fishery that's muddy or stained, it's good to keep a few things in mind. The first thing I like to do when I'm fishing muddy or stained water is to upsize my lures. I like to use larger lures with a bigger profile that'll give off more of a silhouette in the water. Using those larger, bulkier lures in that dirty water gives those bass a better chance to pick up on that bait. For instance, instead of using a 4 or 5 inch worm, I'm going to go up to a 6 or 8 inch worm. Or instead of using a smaller 3 inch swim bait, I'll go to a 4 or 5 inch swim bait. You can see the difference there. Or instead of throwing a small crankbait, I'll go with a much larger crankbait. You can definitely see a big difference there in those two square bill crankbaits. So using those lures with a bigger, bulkier profile is one key thing that I like to do when I'm fishing that dirty water. Now another thing I like to do when I'm fishing murky water is to use darker colors. Now this may seem counterintuitive because you're fishing that darker, dirtier water, but darker colors give off more of a silhouette on the water and allow bass to pick up on your bait better. So instead of using the more natural colors like green pumpkin and watermelon green, I like using those real dark colors. For instance, black and blue or black and blue flake, June bug or purple, or just straight black. All three of those color patterns are excellent choices for that dark, dirty water. Whether you're throwing a worm or stick bait, a swim bait, a creature bait, a jig, a chatterbait, anything like that, those dark colors seem to excel with anytime you're using soft plastics or jigs especially. The darker colors excel. Now if I'm using crankbaits or spinnerbaits, I like more of the bright colors, such as white and chartreuse or chartreuse and black, anything like that has a little bit of chartreuse and bright colors in it, such as this white and chartreuse spinnerbait, or the chartreuse and black square bill here. Anything like that with bright colors on it, that chartreuse lipless crankbait there. Anything that has those bright colors that stick out in that dirty water will definitely excel in that situation. Now another thing I like to do when I'm fishing that murky or stained water is to use noisy lures. I like using baits that make a lot of sound, rattle, vibration, such as a chatterbait. Chatterbait's going to provide a lot of vibration and allow bass to feel it and find it easier in the water. As will a spinnerbait. Spinnerbait's also going to vibrate and create a lot of flash and displace a lot of water as it comes through the water column. A lipless crankbait with rattles in it is also going to be a good choice for that dirty water. Or a square bill crankbait with rattles in it. I always want to make sure I'm using crankbaits with rattles in them when I'm fishing that dirty water. The more sound that you can get your lure to make in that dirty or stained water, the better, because it gives those fish a better chance to find your bait in that water. And finally, if you want to go with a little top water action, a buzzbait is a great choice. It'll create a lot of commotion on the surface as it's brought across the top. Bass will be able to find it fairly easily and home in on it better, because that blade will be spinning and creating a lot of disturbance on the surface. So a buzzbait's another good choice for fishing that dirty water. And one thing I like to do when I'm fishing a spinnerbait in stained or dirty water is I typically like to go with a gold blade. A gold blade excels in that dirty water because it gives off more flash and the fish can see it better and find it easier in that dirty water. That's really the key when fishing dirty water, is giving those fish the best chance possible to find your bait. And by using a gold blade that'll give off more flash, you're giving those fish a really good chance at finding your bait a lot easier. Also, when I'm fishing dirty water, I like to fish real tight to cover. When the water's dirty, bass will typically push as tight to cover as they can. They like to be able to see and feel some sort of cover. So when the water's dirty, they push real tight to it. So anytime you're fishing the bank, fishing grass, or flooded bushes or vegetation, you want to get your bait in there as close as you can to that vegetation and fish as tight to that cover as possible, because those fish are probably going to be pushed up real tight to that cover where they feel most comfortable in that stained and murky water. One last thing that I like to do when I'm fishing stained or dirty water is to slow my approach a little bit. Even though I'm going to be using those louder, noisy lures that give off a larger profile and more of a silhouette, I still want to slow my approach just a little bit. I want to fish slower, soak my bait a little bit longer in certain areas, make multiple casts into the same bush or fallen tree or rock pile. And a lot of times, so just slowing your approach and making multiple casts to the same area can result in catching a fish that you may not catch if you were to fish fast past that area. So slowing your approach is another thing to keep in mind and to do when you're fishing that dirty water. It just gives those fish more time to locate your lure and hopefully strike it. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope these tips help you the next time you find yourself on a muddy, murky, or stained body of water. My rule of thumb is usually anytime the water has less than a foot of visibility, I turn to these tactics and use these louder baits, darker colors, larger profile baits. But keep these tips in mind, and I'm sure they'll help you put more fish in the boat. As always, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please be sure to smash that like button, subscribe to our channel up in this corner, check out our last video in this corner, and there'll be a lot more exciting and helpful fishing videos headed your way. We'll talk to you soon.